Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Emma, and I created Mighty Writer. I'm alongside my husband. So I'm an experienced teacher working across the primary age range up to year 6, and my specialism was in early years and Key Stage 1, as also Senko. And when I was working, especially in early years and Key Stage 1, I felt that there was really a lot of difficulty around the teaching of writing because it's so complex, and for children there's so much to remember, and so many children struggle with it, and increasingly, as the more teachers I speak to, the more obvious that becomes. And so the creation of Mighty Writer happened because I felt there was another way to help children understand the process to become a writer, and it takes children right through from the beginning, from developing their vocabulary, but most importantly, which is what this is all about, is their ownership of writing and the belief in themselves as authors and the way they view themselves, because if that is positive and they're motivated, they are going to become lifelong learners. So firstly, what does ownership mean? So basically, children viewing themselves as writers. They believe in themselves as writers. They have a positive relationship with the writing process. They are driven by their ideas and their desire to communicate these ideas in print. So everything is coming from them. So they feel confident expressing their own ideas in writing. They are happy to make choices about content, about structure, about presentation. They take pride in their writing and they're motivated to improve it, because so many teachers I speak to say, the children are doing okay, but they're getting to year 4 and it's a case of, right, please, can you go back and edit your work? And so many children are not invested in it. They're so reluctant to do that. Children with ownership over their writing see writing as a tool for communication, for creativity, and most importantly, enjoyment. So it's not just a task, which is ultimately, obviously, what our end goal is, that they see the purpose of writing and they're enjoying it. So when children have ownership, they believe their voice matters. It means they write with confidence, they write with purpose and enthusiasm, not because they're told to, but because they want to. So why is ownership important? Because it means they're self-motivated. Without this, they will never be independent writers. They are always going to need a lot of help, a lot of support, a lot of encouragement, because they're not driven by themselves. So without exception, they need to see themselves as writers, and without exception, as teachers, we need to see them as writers. So children who own their writing are more engaged, they're more willing to take risks, and they're more resilient when they're challenged. So that builds a strong link between speaking, thinking, and writing. So how do we know that children have ownership? So they talk and they write with purpose, with enthusiasm, and with increasing independence. So this is all about independence. They're wanting to write. So in a classroom where children have writing ownership, you'll see children who are confident, selecting and talking about their ideas, children choosing what they want to write about and confident explaining that. They're confident in the use of invented spellings. So, particularly in early years, without the fear of being wrong. They're really happy to have a go because their whole purpose is expressing their ideas on paper and sharing their ideas. Children are rereading, editing, or adding to their work independently. They are actually choosing to do it for themselves, and because they are actually independently applying the skills we are teaching. And of course, there's excitement as they write, because children are talking about, what they're working on. So how do we actually go about promoting this? The main way we do this is consistency of approach across days and years, because that promotes and develops a lifelong positive relationship with writing in each child. So we need to help children see writing as meaningful, personal, that it belongs to them, not something they're being asked to do, that they feel they have control. And this is important because if they don't own it, why would they be invested in it? So we are laying the foundations, not just in terms of skills, but in the way they perceive themselves as writers. So our responses, our interactions, and the activities we engage children in are crucial to the success of children having ownership. So it's all about the way we steer them through this. We are coming from a starting point that they are going to be successful, that they have a wonderful imagination, and we are going to draw out their best. So as you know, early years and Key Stage 1 lay the foundation for lifelong attitudes to writing. So many children, and the more teachers I speak to increasingly since COVID, even on entry to school, children already can have a negative relationship with language or perceived difficulties with the art of communicating and the way they view themselves as storytellers and therefore authors. So there can already be many barriers to progress, whether this is SEN or their attitudes or lack of previous input, i.e. being read to. So without exception, our starting point must be that they are authors, whether they have the skills or not. They have a wonderful imagination and we draw this out. So we're coming from the standpoint that they are always successful. They can never go wrong. Because as soon as we suggest that they can't do something or that it needs to be done a certain way, then many children will immediately put up a barrier. This is too hard. I won't be able to do this. So we must realise that by being clever in the way we engage them, we are in effect training them to think for themselves and enabling them to apply new learning independently. So if they were doing a sentence, they're going back saying, I could go back and add an adjective. That's how I want to improve it, rather than us saying, can you add an adjective? So all the things we're putting into them, they are recognising it for themselves. And that has to start right from day one, because we have created an environment in which they are naturally motivated to apply new skills and knowledge. And that is what we're aiming for. And that is exactly what we need. So we are always taking the long view. Where do we need these children to be by the end of year 6? What holds some children back? We need to identify this and we need to tackle it straight away on entry to school. So we're having actually very high expectations from the very start in terms of what children are being exposed to and the skills that are being modelled. So they are given as much time as possible to be exposed to language choices and word order. And if children feel they can do it, then they will. So what does all this look like in practice? So first thing, building the story orally first. If children are confident talkers, this then translates into their writing. They have something to say and they feel valued. So using oracy to build confidence and fluency in ideas before writing is crucial. Now, with Mighty Writer, you've got everything you need in one place to go help children through this process. And Mighty Writer uses pictures. So as you can see here at the top, there's 2 toolbars full of pictures, but there's lots of different topic related toolbars. There's also going to be a new option on the website where you can generate your own images, and that will link to any text you like and any topic you like. So the sky is your limit in terms of what children are able to talk and write about. But using pictures enables children to gain confidence selecting, organising and editing ideas. So as children must realise that they have an imagination and that they have something to say before they can even do anything. So with the Mighty Writer map, because it's so practical, it helps them explore new words and phrases. It's active learning, and what it does is it sparks curiosity. So children start to think, actually, I'm enjoying this, I could try this. So it's but in a very sort of relaxed way. It doesn't matter where they place the pictures or even if a child is coming into school non-verbal. If two pictures they've placed relatively close together, I can connect those to make a sentence. They selected them, they thought of the sentence, they are successful. So everything they're hearing is positive reinforcement. They thought of the sentence, this is what the sentence was. I might even scribe that sentence. So even if they're not doing it for themselves, the fact is they are hearing that positivity. And then I might say things like, can we swap those pictures round? What could the sentence say now? And even if they can't tell me, I can think of a new way to connect those pictures. So they are hearing those words in a different order. Getting them used to moving words and ideas around in their head from the start helps them develop an understanding of meaning and effect. So using Mighty Writer or other storytelling props can help children shape ideas before they commit them to paper, building increasingly sophisticated sentences. So they must be able to say them, as you know, before they can write them down. So you're encouraging storytelling in as many ways as possible, which, you know, Mighty Writer is one thing that you can use, but it encompasses everything. So, you know, storytelling through role play, puppet shows, class storytelling sessions. Mighty Writer is fantastic for using at the end of the day or during the day to model a story. So children are actively seeing you be the author, and you're able to expose them to the way an author thinks. You know, you're selecting ideas, you're changing your mind, but you're enjoying that process. So children are not associating changing your mind with making a mistake. They're realizing that actually an author's trying new things, and that's part of the process. So it's very interesting how children can just observe that and start to develop those habits for themselves. We have to build memory because they need to be able to accurately recall the ideas they've thought of in order to write them down. So hence the use of arrows with Mighty Writer. So arrows can be used to connect the sentences. They can also just be used to connect pictures together. It doesn't matter where the children have placed the pictures on the map. They don't have to start, you know, in the top left-hand corner. They never have to go wrong. But watching them connect those pictures is a really interesting way of assessing them. You know, how they're using their imagination, how they're viewing, you know, the way their story works, etc. So the use of arrows helps them to recall in order, and the pictures and the symbols enable children to recall vocabulary. So with Mighty Writer, you have the verb, you have the adverb. So this is the adjective. So that makes our writing even better. You have the swirl, which is spinning, moving, doing something. So that's your verb. And then you have this shape, changing the verb or changing the sentence. So this is your adverb. And right from reception, when I'm telling stories, I would be using those symbols because I want children to relate those symbols to the vocabulary. And over time, naturally, they start to use them for themselves. And some children will apply it much earlier than others. But the fact is, I've given them a chance to see that vocabulary and see it in context. So we do this so well and children are so absorbed that they are learning without realizing it. They're seeing how ideas are connected, combined, extended, and edited. And we are extremely clever with our questioning. What would happen next? What could it say if you swap those pictures round? Could you add an adjective? So eventually, they naturally start to ask these questions for themselves, which is key to their success as authors. You know, could I go back? Could I add an adjective? So that is what we're wanting them to do. And we need to teach them that from the start. We are never telling them to go back and add something, because if we're having to do that, then they are not independent. So all of this oral structure works because children write better, as you know, when they've rehearsed the structure and the vocabulary orally first. So number 2, making writing purposeful. So as you know, as children are coming into school, what are they wanting to talk about? Firstly, it's about themselves, their own experiences, everything that relates to them. And that is what we use, you know, to spark their interest. So we link writing to real experiences, you know, like you would in reception, in your role play area, in your writing corner, writing thank you cards, signs for the classroom, letters to characters, shopping lists, you know, the list goes on. anything that is going to engage those children because they can relate to it, and we make a point of their writing, whatever that might look like, as being invaluable. So publishing their work in class books, displays, sending it home. So they, right from the start, are developing a sense of pride and feeling that their writing really is very important. This works because children are more motivated and highly likely to be more invested in writing when they understand the reason behind the task and see its impact. So number 3, we need to offer choice and creativity. So we need to let children choose. Now, obviously, we have a whole range of topics. We have schemes of work we use, but it's really making sure that with all those things we've planned, with making sure that everything is consistent, that everything that makes sense, that children feel they have choice. Because if they don't feel they have a choice, they're not owning it. And therefore, it's much more difficult for them to come on board and feel that they can contribute because it's not actually coming from them. So, letting them choose the topic, writing about their pet or their favourite game, the format they want to write in. I'm going to write a list. I'm going to write a story. The tools they're allowed to use, is it pencils? Is it crayons? Are they lying down? Are they standing up to write? All the things that we know, especially, when children come into reception, children need opportunity to access all those things in different ways. Allowing children to write what they want to write is crucial, because if they want to say something or talk about something or write something, they need to know that they will be listened to and their ideas valued. Because at the end of the day, we are wanting these children to be writers. Ultimately, initially, it doesn't really matter what they're writing about. The fact is, are they learning how to build sentences from scratch? So if they are confident building sentences from scratch, then the purposes for which they write will expand over time, and they will naturally be able to transition from what they have chosen to write about to what they are asked to write about, simply because they are confident writers and they know they can do it and are excited to put their skills and knowledge into practice. They are at the point where they are self-confident, and we create an environment where they know their achievements, their hard work is recognised and valued. So we need to think very carefully about the writing tasks which we give them, alongside the text and the topics which we're covering, and the way we build those tasks up over time. And really thinking about, if we ask them to do this, is that actually independent writing? Is it coming from them? Now, with the Mighty Writer Map, whatever we model on here, whatever we work with as a class, whether we're just connecting pictures together to make up a simple sentence, or whether we're constructing a more structured sentence using the sentence mats and redoing it, editing it, the idea is that children are never going away and copying from the mat, as in, if I have created, 2 or 3 sentences and we've done that together, they are never going to go away and just write that. I might model transcribing it so they understand how they've seen it visually and then seen it written down. But the whole purpose of me building that sentence with them is to give them the skills and the understanding and the motivation to be able to go away and plan their own, because they are equipped with the skills and the understanding and the desire to do it for themselves. They know what they want to say and they know how they're going to say it. So every piece of writing that you do as a result of using Mighty Writer is always independent. And it's a case of thinking, well, if they can't do that, then where are their gaps? What is holding them back from being able to write that sentence? Do they know what they want to say? Do they have the right vocabulary? Can they organise those words? So you're gradually introducing all those things with Mighty Writer. You really focused on the pictures, picture order, retelling, adding vocabulary, etc. So ownership increases when children feel in control. And lots of children who don't feel in control, immediately then you're developing, the behaviour issues, children shutting down, not willing to engage. They need to feel in control. But ultimately, we do actually have ownership, because we are so sure of how we are organising this task and what we are presenting to the children, that we're so clever at doing that they actually feel ultimately in control. Number 4, we're using high quality texts as inspiration. Because obviously that is giving children access to how words are organised. High quality text enable them to write for different purposes and understand how language works. So, using text, for example, like the lion inside, for example, enables you to model good writing and spark imagination. Using a wide range of text types exposes children to the way that we can write for different purposes. And you're doing all the things you normally do. With Mighty Writer, you're not needing to change your classroom practice at all. This is literally visually supporting what you're already doing and helping children to engage in an extremely visual, hands-on way. So you're asking all those key questions. What would you write next? Could you rewrite this part from a different character's point of view? Your questions are open-ended because you're helping children to know that they have choices, and then they can apply things independently. So my questions will be things like, right, could you go back and add an adjective? Could I change the punctuation at the end? Could we have a different sentence starter? So it's always... Now, if the children don't know the answer, it doesn't matter. The fact is, I've prompted them to think differently about that sentence. If they don't have the answer, it doesn't matter. If I swap 2 pictures round and they can't think of a way to connect them, it doesn't matter. I can do it for them. But the fact is, I've given them opportunity to know that we can write that sentence in different ways, or that potentially we could use different punctuation. And I've given them opportunity to hear words in a different order, which leads very nicely into fronted adverbials later on. And as the teacher, you're also never on the spot. So if children select a couple of pictures and I can't think of a way to connect them to make a sentence, it really doesn't matter. If nobody can think of a way, we can say, well, let's change one of those pictures then. So it's actually very, very relaxed. Children need to know that authors, spend a lot of time thinking about the right words, thinking about the way to connect things. So you're actively modelling that using Mighty Writer, just in a very relaxed way. So all those things help encourage deep engagement with the text, and they show writing that is a craft to explore, rather than thinking it just has to be like this. Number 5, you're celebrating the author's voice. So you are really encouraging inventive spelling and personal vocabulary right from early years, because otherwise children will be very unsure about what they want to say. They'll be very reserved, thinking, I don't want to try it in case I get it wrong. It's much more important that they really feel that their ideas are valued and they want to put them on paper. And alongside the Mighty Writer map, right from the word go, you can have all your normal mark making opportunities. I'm not even going to say to them, oh, would you like to write that down, or do you want to draw a picture? I'm not saying anything that they have to do. If I'm working alongside them and I've made up a sentence, I might then model writing that sentence on a piece of paper, so they're seeing me do it, but at no point am I saying to them, can you do that? I'm waiting for them to start to realise for themselves that they have something to say and that they can communicate in print. Allowing children the time is crucial, as much time as possible to experiment with being an author. They need to play around with words. They need time to organise and edit their ideas in a very practical way, and Mighty Writer allows them to do this. And during feedback, you are highlighting to the children what's interesting, what's original, what's expressive, not just what's correct. Because otherwise children are immediately thinking, oh, I could have done this better. And for some children, most children, they're suddenly not feeling as good about what they did. So I feel personally the focus should always be on the positive, because children are much more likely to engage when they feel good about themselves and much more motivated, about their potential in terms of how they can still improve. So many children disengage and feel despondent from very early on because writing just seems too hard. And, and from a teacher's point of view, as you're moving through the school, you're going into year 1, going into year 2, that gap becomes wider and wider, and it's so bitty in terms of what some children can do, what some children can't do. And the idea is it's just making it so much easier for teachers to think, right, actually this is where they're all going to be, and they are all going to be there. And with Mighty Writer you can do whole class work. You make sure that everything on the mat is there for your most able pupils so that they are making progress in whole class inputs. Your lower ability children are seeing it visual, it's very repetitive, it all fits together for them, but it means they're also accessing the higher order skills. And then when you're working with smaller groups or one-to-one, you can just take off or add on anything you need for those children. So you can really make it very bespoke for them. So we need to help children value their ideas over getting it right. The getting it right will come in time, and children will be choosing to edit because they do have the ownership, which is the whole reason they need it in the first place. We want them to want to improve it, to try something new. We get to a point where they absorb and apply new learning independently. Number 6, scaffolding, and then stepping back. So we need to provide support because we are providing the building blocks for these children to follow. So it's progressive, but it's not necessarily prescriptive. So you're doing all the normal things, word maps, story maps, sentence starters, but you're gradually removing those scaffolds to encourage independence, because the aim is that children are starting to be able to hold and move those words around in their head. With Mighty Writer, you can obviously scaffold sentences, whole texts, and any genre. So children are frequently exposed to building increasingly sophisticated sentences from scratch until, like I said, they can start to do it in their own heads, choosing the vocabulary, organising the words. The idea is that by Key Stage 2, they don't need Mighty Writer anymore. Their foundation in writing is so strong that they can take on board and apply new concepts and continue to make good progress. So in an ideal world, this is introduced in nursery, all through reception, year 1, year 2. And it's not just being used in literacy, it's being used frequently throughout the day for even just 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here. We're just going to think of a list of adjectives. We're lining up for assembly. Can we just generate 4 adjectives to go with that picture? Can we quickly build a sentence? Somebody choose a sentence starter, somebody choose the pictures, somebody choose the full stop. What does that say? Could we improve it? So it's little and often drip feeding all those things. And if children have been given opportunity to see this and use this for 3, possibly 4 years, the idea is they're going into Key Stage 2 and they literally don't need it. But lots of schools are using Mighty Writer up until year 6 because it's so useful for intervention for children who have gaps in their understanding and need consolidation on Key Stage 1 objectives. So allowing children to work in pairs and talk as much as possible about building sentences is invaluable in developing their understanding of and love of language. So they can use mini Mighty Writers to do this. So on the website, there are mini Mighty Writers. There's a whole range of these, and they can be enlarged to A3. And the idea is that children are able to work together, talking, actually building a love of language and an understanding of how to improve it, how to refine and build these sentences, so that eventually they don't need that scaffold anymore, and they can do it in their head. You're teaching self-check routines. Have I used finger spaces, full stops? Does it make sense? Because like I said, alongside Mighty Writer, you are doing that continually when you are transcribing the sentences. Whatever we do on here, I will always model it, and I will ask for the children's support in writing that sentence as their phonics and spelling's improving. And when I've written that sentence, I will deliberately make a point of going back and pointing to every word as I say that sentence. So even though I'm not telling children what I'm doing, I'm modelling that process of rereading it, checking it for sense, so that children start to form that habit for themselves. Because as you know, even your more able writers, they're writing very quickly. They've got a lot in their head. They write it all down. They're missing words out. Actually, when you read it back, it doesn't quite make sense. So right from the start, just modelling that process, but doing everything in a very relaxed, very calm way, in the knowledge that the longer they see that and the earlier you start modeling it, the so much more likely to apply it for themselves. So this obviously works because the power is in the modelling on a regular basis, and children learn to scrutinise and improve their own writing, and that is actually what you want them to do. Number 7, making writing a part of daily life. So as you do anyway, you're setting up writing areas with exciting prompts, postcards, envelopes, mini books, photos, etc. You're including writing in all areas, role play corners, science explorations, maths explanations. I mean, you can use Mighty Writer, to support any topic as well. You might have done a science experiment. We're going to write out the science experiment. We're going to write out a list of instructions for how to plant the sunflower seed. You can do all of that using Mighty Writer. So they're able to visualize how that genre is laid out, the type of vocabulary we're using, etc. Giving opportunities for mark making, like I said, emergent writing alongside the Mighty Writer mat, so that children are associating recording their ideas with a relaxed and confident mindset. We are literally teaching them how to learn without even realizing they're learning. Like I said, spending 2 minutes making up a sentence or generating a list of adjectives. So children are just becoming so familiar with the processes and knowledge that it becomes a part of their writing very naturally. And, like I said, it's thinking whereabouts, in year 6 are the problems. Why is it that some of these children don't know what they want to say? They're not using, expansive vocabulary. And that is what we're starting right in reception. We're just going to show them everything: verbs, adverbs, commas between adjectives, everything. Because the longer they see it and the easier that it seems, it's just easier for them to apply it. So, we want writing to become a natural part of play and learning, not just a lesson. And finally, number 8, giving genuine praise and ownership. So, using phrases like, you're the author, what do you want to say? Giving them that feeling of importance, that I know it. It's not a case of I'm being told to do this because I don't know. Actually, you do know, and we're drawing it out of you. And the more things I tell you, the more you'll then be able to do. So, I love how you described that part. That was so original. You're saying things like that and talking to them like that, right from the word go. And that reinforces their identity as a writer, right from 3 or 4 years old, not just as a pupil completing a task. So, at the end of the day, what are we teaching writing for, unless children are not so engaged that they will become lifelong learners? Now, that's the kind of overview of, how to promote ownership in writing in early years and Key Stage 1. We run other webinar sessions, and these are all listed on our website. So for the autumn term, there'll be a whole range of themes. They're run once a month. And if you think there's another thing that would be interesting to focus on, then you can just email us, you can let us know, and then we can do any themes that you think are, current things that would be interesting. Also, we've just reduced the price for Mighty Writer. So each mat is now £249. So I just wonder whether anybody does have, what questions do you have that, you would like me to answer? I hope you found that, interesting.
If you are feeling shy, you are very welcome to put questions in the chat as well. Although it was very comprehensive, I have to say.
Yes, live demo lessons. Well, what I do is the webinars I do are live. So what will happen is I can talk you through. So sometimes I might literally meet with, say, a reception team of teachers. The recording is going to be shared. That will be shared, won't it, David? Yeah.
Yes, it will. Yeah.
So I might do, some, a group of reception teachers might say, right, okay, then this is our topic. These are the things we're wanting to achieve. These are our objectives. How can I best use Mighty Writer to support it? Oh, delivering to children. There's nothing on there. There's lots of things on the website which talk about, you know, people's results, the things that they're doing. There's a school called Horns Mill, which have been like our beacon school, so you can go on there and see all the things they've done with children, examples of work, etc. What was the other question? Do you offer training to schools? Yes. So training is £49 a year for 4 years, and that is completely bespoke to your school. So initially that might look like a whole school staff meeting. And so everybody exactly, you know, just knows what Mighty Writer is, even if potentially not all staff are using it. And then you can set up a running program. So you might say, right, please could we train all the Key Stage 1 staff, all the early years staff, all the TAs in Key Stage 2 who are working on interventions. So, and that can just be bespoke for your school ongoing. You know, you might have new members of staff coming in. The important thing is that people feel supported, but also realise that you're not actually having to change your teaching practice, that this will comfortably sit alongside anything you already do. Any other schemes of work you use, any other resources you use, any other strategies you use, this doesn't replace them, it goes alongside. But equally, it's a standalone resource. It will cover all your objectives right up to your, you know, end of year 2 into year 3. So do you have lesson plans that break down how to use the resources? Yes, we do. Everything's in the teacher zone of the website.
Brilliant. So the person that's just joined the call, yes, the recording of this session is going to be shared with everybody, so that will be sent out automatically. I've also just popped a feedback form in the chat as well. If you're able to fill this in, just let us know what you think about today's session. That would be amazing. We're actually going to be doing a prize draw as well for the people who fill this in before 5:30, so we're going to be drawing 2 Amazon vouchers for everybody who fills this in, and as there are about 60 participants in this meeting, that means that you have a 1 in 30 chance of collecting a £25 Amazon voucher for giving us some feedback on today. I think there's been another question, Emma.
Yeah. So for children in year 1, would you use Mighty Writer to help them hold a sentence in their head before writing it? Absolutely. I mean, you would build that sentence really carefully over time. So these, each one of these is basically one sentence. There's 2 different lengths for each colour. So green is your kind of beginning and build up. Orange is the middle, red is the end, but you can also use the colours for different purposes. So if we were planning a letter, I can use the colours to represent different paragraphs, or I can use the colours to represent different sections in a non-chronological report, for example. You've got 2 different length sentences, because obviously by year 2 you want them to start writing in sentences of different lengths. Understanding that creates different effects, etc. So you can model that really clearly. But what you're doing is initially you're just using pictures and connecting pictures, starting to add symbols like verbs and adverbs, sentence starters. When you actually come to actually start using the sentence mats, then you are literally just doing single standalone sentences initially. They could link to topics, they could link to the text you're doing, but as I said, in a way it doesn't matter what the content is, because it's all about teaching children how to build that sentence, hold it in their head like you've just said, and then write it down. So my questions can be very specific. So once there was a mermaid, full stop. You know, where did the mermaid live? Once there was a mermaid who lived in the sea, full stop. I'm asking questions all the time. Could we swap the mermaid and the sea round? Would that make more sense? So I'm continually thinking about word choice, but also word order, so that children start to get into that habit. And of course, whatever we do, I'm modelling, scribing that sentence. The more things we start to introduce children to and add, the more sophisticated those sentences will be. Once there was a beautiful mermaid who lived in the sea, full stop. Once there was a beautiful mermaid who swam quickly in a choppy sea, full stop, go back. Could we choose a different sentence starter? So your focus is building memory, but you don't do the sentences until you've done the pictures first and just connected the pictures together, simply so that they can recall what they've thought of. And over time, those sentences, would you let them take the sentence map with them when you want them to write it down? No, because what you would do is you would do this whole class. Then you might have some children going away. Now that's where these come in. So whatever we have planned on here, let's say we have done a recount of a school trip and we've maybe done 3 or 4 sentences for that recount, and I'm focusing on time connectives and all those sentence starters. I'm not worried about the number of sentences I'm modelling, and I'm not worried about doing a whole detailed recount. What I'm worried about is helping children to understand what we're writing for, the purpose for which we're writing, and how to choose and organise their vocabulary, so that children are going away and they're able to think, I know what I want to say and I know how I'm going to say it. So for example, we might have done 2 or 3 sentences on here, talked about them, swapped them around, changed ideas, I've modelled transcribing them. Children are then going away. So some children will be working in pairs using these, working together on their recount. Some children might then be working with me. I might take this off the wall, it's on the floor, they're sitting around it, and we're going to build a recount together. And I might have these on clipboards, or I might have children where I'm cutting this down and they're literally just building the first sentence. So you provide the pictures and the symbols to build the sentence on the mat. On the mats, there's a whole range of them. So some of them don't have any sentence starters, so you can write your own ones. They have different pictures down the side, so you can decide the level at which your child is working and what you feel they need. And then you don't have the pictures though, because the whole point is that they're doing the pictures for themselves. And what I say to teachers is no more than 2 pictures on those sentences, just like you would have no more than 2 pictures on the map, because 2 pictures is more than enough to help children write actually a very sophisticated sentence. And once they've got to the point where they're doing that and they're ready to add more pictures, actually they are independent writers. So for example, you know, on here, if I was describing the mermaid, I could say, let's add another adjective. We could separate those adjectives with a comma, or we could join those adjectives together with the word and. So when children go away, they've got these to use, but if they were making up their own, they're doing really simple pictures. So, you know, if they were doing a mermaid, they might just draw a fish's tail, and they're going to see me do that in my own modelling, because on the mat there's also blanks. So if I had a story about a mermaid and I needed that mermaid again, which is obviously very likely, I might just draw the fish's tail. That's going to represent the mermaid. So I'm keeping it extremely simple because my whole focus is building memory and helping them, like you were saying, to hold that sentence in their head. Would you suggest have the layout like you have behind you in class? Right, so what you do when you're using this mat whole class, whenever you start using it, whoever you start using it with, you don't actually display everything in one go, because obviously you're building this up. So these toolbars around the edge are actually removable. So you would remove all the toolbars apart from the pictures. So your focus initially is children selecting and organising ideas, choosing the pictures, swapping them around, making up simple sentences. Then you start to add the arrows, so children understand that if I follow that sequence, it makes sense, it always says the same thing. When you start to move on to the sentence mats, you add in all the toolbars around the edge, but you don't put everything on them straight away. So if I was starting to introduce sentence starters in the autumn term of reception, I might have down the side here just literally 4 or 5 sentence starters, because immediately I'm then giving children a choice. They can see physically how that sentence starter is changing and how it's changing that sentence. Over here, I might start with full stops and maybe the stars. So I'm building this up, and whatever the children can see, they know what it is and they know how to use it. And the aim, like I said, is by the end of year 2, all children can use all of the things on here accurately and independently in their own writing. So in terms of modelling a story on here, if children were working together, maybe in a small group, and they're working with me, and they chose to put their first sentence in the bottom right-hand corner, it doesn't matter, because the arrows will show the way it's connected. So, like I said, they can't go wrong. If I am modelling it, then I would start in the top left until children get to a point where they naturally start to do that for themselves.
Brilliant.
Okay.
You're getting some love in the chat from Rachel Flanagan, Emma. I think we probably ought to have one last question before we wrap it up. Celia has asked, can you use this with colourful semantics?
Yes, lots and lots of schools are using it with colourful semantics, and it's working really well. So, I mean, if you want to have further discussion about that, then I'm really happy for you to, to book a separate webinar or to give us a ring or email.